Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Community Safety Partnership meeting. My name is Councillor Angela Obad. I'm Cabinet Member of Communities and Co-Chair of the Community Safety Partnership. Please note that this meeting is being recorded for live and subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet websites. We'll now move on to introductions. So we'll start off that side of the table. If you could just give your name and your role, please.
Yeah, hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is David Shaw, I'm the manager, Council Demand, Harringay Council.
ASB manager for tenancy at the council.
Sandy Broker, Interline Analysis for Community Safety.
Hi, I'm Will Memorize, Director of Public Health for Harringay.
Hello, I'm Lisa Snebs and I'm the Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Hi, I'm Dave Rossi. I'm here from the Home Office, where I'm responsible for drug policy and legislation. I'm mainly just doing Sarah.
I'm surrounded by the Home Office. I'm seeing perhaps some children's schools and
Hello, I'm Sarah Vaughan. I'm policy lead for Young Futures Prevention Partnerships and Home Office.
And I say Charlie, Doug Pressing Services and Carl.
I'm Matthew Nance. I'm the Head of Service for the Justice Service. And I'm not Caroline Haynes, just so you know.
I'm Izzy, I'm a clinical psychologist and one of the project leads for Project Future and the Harringay Vanguard. It's part of the by that what you're affected by seriously violent.
Hi everyone, my name is Annie Zuri, Division Officer, Domestic Abuse Lead, so responsible for our domestic abuse and violence against women and girls services.
I am Abby Witchley, the Violence Against Women and Girls Programme Lead for Harringay Council, Secretary of Public Health.
I'm Megan Douglaston, Violence Against Women and Girls Coordinator in Public Health for Harringay Council.
Afternoon, all. Hubert Malcolm, Assistant Director of Environment. One of my areas of responsibility is ASB Community Safety.
Good afternoon, everyone. Elvan Sudside, Community Safety, leading on paper.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Brown. I'm the IOM Prison Link at Pentonville Prison.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ricardo from Kadar. I'm Custodial Manager at HMP Pentonville and the developer of a young adult program with change, which is designed specifically for 18 to 25-year-olds.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joey Glenmore. I'm the Strategic Lead for Community Safety.
Thank you. And we've got Ian Martin on the call. Ian, you can introduce yourself, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Ian Martin, Neighbourhood Policing Superintendent for Harringay.
Thank you. Apologies, are there any apologies?
apologies from Jackie's book.
Thank you. Are there any urgent business?
No.
Thank you. Do members have any declarations of interest? No? Do any members have any comments on the CSP minutes held on the 24th of October 2024? We would take that as correct recordings. Membership noted. And on to the next item, which is on reducing reoffending. This is going to be introduced by Joe Benmore, and it will be a workshop that we'll be having after the presentation. But also, I just want to highlight that if there are any actions taken from this item, can it please be clearly stated as an action point so that we can track this. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to this month's Community Safety Partnership. I'm so rubbish at doing these. I did do things to fix. Okay, so I'll stand up and just make a start. So I'm not going to be talking to you for 2 hours. I know that's not what we want. It's hot and people won't want to hear me talking away. So the idea today, as people know, the Community Safety Partnership Boards are now themed around the key priority of the Community Safety Strategy, which is our new strategy in Harringay from 24 to 2027. And it's primarily linked to the drivers of crime and antisocial behaviour. We've had previous themes. I think this is our second or third in-person meeting, but we've had previous meetings held by teams where we've looked at other themes like violence against women and girls, serious youth violence, etc., as you can see on the screen. As the chair said, today, the focus of today's board will be on reducing reoffending, and you'll hear from a range of criminal justice partners and colleagues from police, IOM, Operation ADDA teams, probation service, public health, prisons who are here today, housing, just to talk about some of the challenges, opportunities and barriers faced when working with ex-offenders. I think really the key for these meetings is not for me to talk to you or for you to talk back to me, it's for us to talk to each other about what the issues are, what issues we face when working with ex-offenders, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, you know, where could we pull resources, where can we utilise other opportunities that other services may have access to. That's the idea for today. I'm just going to really set the context and then we'll just move into the discussions. Okay, so why is it a priority for the community safety, for community safety? We want to reduce overall crime levels and support offenders in our communities because they live in our communities to break the cycle of reoffending. And one of our outcomes will focus on the work we do across systems to do that. How we do that? Well, the only way we can do it is working with each other. So it's working collaboratively with key statutory and non-statutory partners to achieve the reductions in the rate and frequency of offending that we'd all like to see. And this is not just adults, this is young people as well. And I know we've been doing particularly well in terms of youth reoffending, which I can say probably. And we do this by just utilising partnership intelligence. So we work with our analysts and with the analysts in the police teams and IOM teams. We work with key partners like the Majesty's Prison Service, the Probation Service and other statutory services, the Home Office, for example. And then we want to measure our performance through analysis of police recorded crime data, referrals to specialist support services and like victim satisfaction. Okay, so let's just have a quick brief look at some of the reoffending data that I've managed to dig out. It always changes and it is always over a 2-year period. So there is a slight caveat. It's basically proven reoffending data that I'm looking at. So what we can see, the last iteration, I suppose, of the data snapshot was from 2022, and this 23 actually. This highlighted that around a third of all offenders who are released from a custodial sentence go on to commit further offences. It's about a percentage rise on the same period prior to 2021, as you can see. Adult offenders had a proven reoffending rate of around 25.4% and juveniles around 33%. I think that's changed now. What we know is that adults released from custody or starting orders had a rate of around 33%, which was up by about 2 percentage points from the last period. And adults released from a custodial sentence of less than 12 months, which will be no surprise to people, had a rate of around 57%, which was up around 1.7 percentage points. Again, the highest range is those released from a sentence less than or equal to 6 months, who have a range of around 60%, 60% reoffending. And we can see, as I said there, that the proven reoffending rate up until from January to March in 2023 was around 25%. So we know that over the years, the reoffending rates have been particularly stable, around 30%. So in terms of reoffending, what does it cost us as a society? Well, we know that it costs the pre-pandemic analysis of the economic and social cost of reoffending in England and Wales was estimated at around £18 billion a year, which is a lot of money. The estimated economic cost of social costs of reoffending by adults was around 16 billion, and theft reoffences, which made up the most of the estimated costs for adults compared to other offence groups, was around 9.3 billion. And it's just a point of note to say that we are now starting to see more of that type of offending occurring anyway, getting steam offences and things, that kind of stuff. In terms of index disposal type, adult offenders who have previously received a court order or custodial sentence accounting for the largest portion of estimated costs at around £6.5 billion a year. And the cost of reoffending by children and young people, i.e. those under the age of 18, is around 1.5 billion, with theft comprising the largest portion compared to other groups. Okay, so when we're looking at recidivism and reducing reoffending, what we do know is that there are there's a bit more than 8, but there's 8 criminogenic factors. And hopefully these won't be a surprise to people, but things like accommodation, employment, education, drug misuse, alcohol use, misuse, people seeking and behaviour, those types of issues are forward. What we know that works in reoffending is, what we do know is it's highly individualised. So no, it's not a one size fits all. Everybody's different, everybody responds different. But what we have found is that those where we can put in wraparound services that meet the needs of those offenders, i.e. the criminogenic needs that I just outlined, we have more of an opportunity for them to resist or reduce their offending term. So I'm not going to go through that in detail, but that's just a bit of background. Okay. So we have a couple of questions that we'd like to for you guys to think about. So we're going to move into the kind of main discussion point of the day. And what we'd like to do, I'll just actually change that slide slightly, so I'm just going to read this out. So I think there's 20 people in here that count around 20. So if we split into groups of say 5. What we're asking for, the first question is about the biggest challenges your service faces when working with offenders or ex-offenders. So these are some of the issues or challenges that you face as a service, as a professional, when working with offenders or ex-offenders. What we do, we'll spend about 10 minutes. And those online, it'd be useful if you could maybe, if you've got anything to contribute, obviously put your hand up and you can obviously please get involved. And then we just ask one person to come back and just feedback a few points. What we'd like to do today is to generate some actions, really, for us to take back and think about. We're not going to answer it. We're not looking for answers today. We may need to come back, think about it, kind of mull it over a bit and then come back with different types of ideas. But generally today, we just want to get some ideas from you about what we could do differently, really, or collectively and as individual services. The next question will be around what the biggest opportunities, interconnections and dependencies that are apparent. So that could be things like you have to, for if you work with substance misuse, you might need to work with the housing team, you might need to work with prison services. What are your interconnections? How can we make that more effective? What are your dependencies? And then really the key question for everybody is what can this community safety partnership? When I say the community safety partnership, it's not myself or the chair or the borough commander, that's all of us collectively. What can we do collectively to support each other to work in this space? What we do know, the givens are, we don't have much money, but less money, less resource. So we need to do more, in a sense, with what we've got and be more effective with what we've got. And we can do that if we work together collectively. I think the days of siloed working are long gone, certainly since I've been in Harringay anyway. And I think we do work really well together. So I'm sure we can come up with some ideas about how we could utilise, kind of support each other to kind of utilise some of those services. So what I'm going to do, I've got some paper and some pens, trusty paper and pens. I'll kind of distribute them around the room. And then if you guys just come into little groups, and then what I'll do is I'll time 10, 15 minutes and call a stop. And then it's just shouting out a few of the answers and then we'll move on to the next question.
Before we move on, I know Councillor Desmond.
Yeah, just had a quick question. Really. In that data, I wondered if there was any obvious why I'm asking, if there was any specific data around the costs around domestic abuse, violence against women and girls, specifically.
There is. So can I take that as an action, Councillor, and I'll make sure that we'll get that information back to you.
Before we move on, any further questions? Okay. I've just got 2 new people who are on the call, just for us to record it for our minutes. David and Dina, if you can introduce yourselves. David?
I'm David, I just joined.
Oh,
it's okay. See you next week.
I want to see the slides.
Dina, can you hear me?
Hi, I'm Dina Samanovic. I'm Deputy Head of Service at Victim Support. I'm sorry I had the trouble with logging in.
That's fine. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so shall we go into
Yeah.
two groups?
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, yeah. So if we may just split the room in half.
Maybe this is my job.
Yeah.
We did.
So really, it's just about how we want to defend this. How we want to defend the next.
This group's, oh, okay, cool. Balance in size.
I'll shift over.
Gonna come to join.
Yeah.
Shift over as well.
No, go on, is it, please? I can stand up. No, I can, no, I stand up. I stand up.
Okay, so some of these changes, I think. We start by. So I think that's.
I think it's always been hard to make sure that we can give people a point in terms of
I'm the designee manager.
and how this. So when we first started the IOM, it was like a lot of hand holding.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, the meeting of the game.
Yeah, that's fine.
So there wasn't a gap in the when you rely on people to actually do it, they get released, they're out of the game. That's the to the drug sex. So making sure that it's that kind of support there. Especially they come out of the gates. I know again it comes down to the resources. The police is resources can be more information again. Such big cohorts now with the reset and stuff. A lot of the people who are in kind of not so serious crimes that are getting.
I'm Will, I'm Director of Public Health, and we have responsibility for drug and alcohol services, amongst other things. Which
Get released early. The problem with that is very last minute issues where we find out who's going and who's not going. So they will make a big list, then maybe it's the day before we know if they're going. So, yeah.
You get a chance to risk this as well.
No.
Interest to support better word being informed that the people who are using their like victim survivors being there. So they're always in prison.
Yeah. Generally, all I will find out.
Services.
That's cool, but there's a chance that it might be cool because it's a separate matter.
And Sandy, I live on Italian analytics for handling contact machines.
And basically it was just forming
We're all pretty relevant to this.
the ideas that want to do release
Challenges.
to the contacts. Police if it does actually go to court. But again, if someone gets released in court, we probably haven't find out until it's late in the evening. When they're supposed to come back to the breach, they'll have to come back. It'll be the next day. within that time, we decide about that. So again, it's within service, it's very automatic. It needs to be the call of the police, the prison, and the community needs that. So there needs to be some sort of.
Did they want to start it down? Your social regards to. We've made us defending.
Sometimes it's not necessarily what you do.
They're plumbing to deliver. There's two probation officers. Challenges are in terms of that.
One of the things is
Health.
not waiting until they're released from prison to make this contact. One of the things that we do with Susie that works quite well from what she's doing is she comes into prison and builds those relationships. So when the individual is being released, he's got a face, or they've got a face that they can relate to, right? So they're building those relationships. What you're doing is you're waiting for people to be released from prison, and you're showing up and expecting a young adult, for example, who's got trust issues to trust in you and believe in you to actually deliver for them. Whereas if you're building those relationships from the get-go, say, I don't know, 12 weeks, 14 weeks before that individual's being released, you're building that relationship. So when he or she walks out the gate, like they're going to somebody that they already know. So you're empowering them to.
About the pressures in terms of and that was obviously keeping that active. That's what I was saying.
Actually, these things that kind of great. How that makes settlement a challenge. So you're really then trying to sort of other partners in other local.
Again, what's happening obviously with the population, straight into prison at the moment, those cities in sentence, and sent to other prison down the area. It's likely to get released out.
So what happened to those because I don't think it's quite.
So say they went to Highlands in some. Maybe given a crowd thing to come back to home. Yeah, once they're released from custody, once they finish the sentence, they got released from Highlands. Yeah, they get a travel card, they get their release money, and then basically where they end up, that's it. So
Whereas,
children say living somewhere.
Issues. That revision of the place where they got it is quite a quick one.
Escalated into prison.
Out of.
And I think that's what
Back into the. It's what I say, God, it's measure even to the it's possible to help. So my challenge is that
we went from
trying to use something back. Yeah. We've got all of the partnerships there. We're going to continue to do that when they get a place that.
Lots of area bands now.
The biggest what's work for us is like it's having that.
Really great support.
Meeting with them, making a relationship with before they actually leave custody. So I always think like, you don't have to go through the prison process with me. If you want to come in, just email me, ring me, I'll arrange, get off some way. And having that place, please do it.
first we know.
So, it's that related.
But is that across the board? Because I feel like if people as individuals are left to their own devices, unless there are officers that put in that effort to try to do their release. So that's something that's.
And your point of view, because it's only me, it's not the whole prison, so, but I'm not sure that we don't. And for example, like actual has been sorted out, I'm sure they're just that's to sort it out.
Listen,
It's not going to be big when I get released from that. They know then I think I need to make it wrong. Someone's going out of the ocean, so that's they actually arranged to go and meet him over the day after he got released. They knew at some point, once that accommodation finishes, but they It's just, it's just really.
But it does make me think about like, I guess, somebody is being released, if Rick lets me know, or James lets me know, somebody is being released and they're going to Hounslow, not ideal for me, traveling down to Hounslow, but I will, just to be able to like, at least try and then bring them into local space, but I don't know like what the feasibility is like other services. Like working in that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Quite often, funding or whether that might be more resources, it's quite restrictive. So it's quite difficult. Just in terms of another element, like one of the challenges for me is about pathways for education. It's very difficult to be accepted into pathway for those. I think locally, I think the challenge for us is that what opportunity can we provide? We really haven't set pathways around providing those pathways at all different levels, so for young people and adults. So what does that look like? How can we capacity that? And I think there's so much opportunity in terms of all of the restructuring happening, with all of the estates being modernised, and everything else, all of the building contracts, all of those things, and social value elements. I don't know whether we're holding those organisations to account on social value, and how do we have that small proportion of those young adults, young offenders coming through? That pathway is there. Because ultimately, you know why they're reoffenders. They're reoffenders majority of the time is either drug misuse, alcohol misuse, deprivation, no money, all of those factors. So how do we see them? That's a massive.
What I'll do is I'm going to bring us.
Are we going to discuss the challenges first and then move on to the?
Yeah.
Okay.
This one. So if I'll start bringing this back to you. Sorry.
And that trauma of that transition from prison as well, it's like, and it's really acute. People will experience quite a lot.
The ones in the community is that reoffending cohorts, the amount of trauma they've experienced either themselves or witnessed.
Yeah.
Is a mess.
Sort of like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think the comments about.
I won't have points.
Active, and then we'll move on to. Someone. Yes, okay.
Stand, so I don't have to.
That's why I think we didn't get as many. Okay, so we're just going to come back as a wider group, just to kind of go through some of the responses. As I said, we're not looking for definitive answers. It's not about kind of coming up with solutions. It's about understanding what the context is that we're working in, and then we can start to look at some kind of how we can start to bring those gaps together and reduce and mitigate some of those issues. So a couple of things that jump out to me. I think one of the biggest ones for me in terms of challenges is mental health. You mentioned, and trauma that Izzy mentioned. Often we have people coming out of prison or going into prison with significant mental health issues or undiagnosed mental health issues, learning issues. And often the prison experience itself is traumatizing. I mean, you can imagine it's a traumatizing place. We've seen the horror. When I say horror stories, it's not being disrespectful to colleagues from the prison service, but we know some prisons are in dire need of renovation and work. And it's not easy being in those places. It must be awful. Some of the other things are around pathways. So, for example, ETE, substance misuse, those kinds of things. Often convictions can make it more difficult for adults, young people coming out of prison to get employment. We need a more systems approach to working with young people, especially young people, I think, coming out of prison or adults who've had a long history of unemployment or educational issues. That's another one. I think a big one that came out in both is people being released into our borough that we didn't know about, which has been happening for God knows how long since I've been a professional in this area of work, and also people being released into other boroughs. What that does is it makes us in the communities, it makes it difficult for us to plan for resettlement. Often it's very last minute. For example, early custodial release can be very last minute, for example. Often we don't get that time to plan, and that can cause real problems for us. I mean, the thought of a young person saying being released, up north somewhere on his own, on her own, given a rail card and told to come back to London, just fills me with dread, to be honest. But anyway, it's happening. That's what we're dealing with.
And we discussed with our group, particularly around housing and homelessness, and potentially offenders not necessarily meeting priority needs. So they may not be prioritised for housing, even if they are potentially homeless. And obviously, housing is a big potential, as we saw, risk factor in terms of reoffending, and particularly that, and also, as Joe mentioned, about not really getting information on who's in the borough, if other boroughs place within our borough, for example. And we heard of a specific case where there was a bit of a high-profile incident because of that happening not too long ago. So clearly there are some big challenges.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you. Is anyone online? Does anyone online want to contribute before we move on? Nothing heard. Okay, thank you. So without kind of wasting any further time, we'll move on to the next question. It's very similar. This is about opportunities. I think some people got into opportunities as well, because I know there was one that was mentioned in my group. But just looking at what are our opportunities, kind of based on what we've already said, what are the opportunities to start looking at ways we could improve that? Better information sharing would be one. And that's the kind of idea.
So I guess where do we work well already?
Yeah, and where do we already work well?
Which other way?
Opportunities.
Okay, so
what works well at the moment? What's working?
Yeah, I was going to say when they.
Yeah, sure.
But that was actually quite, in a way, helped us with people. Because we knew exactly when people were coming out. We put on services in Opera Junction. People were sleeping. So there's a place where everyone could go and have that coordinated. But that's really, actually shows that we know.
We're in and out all the time.
Yeah, actually helps.
Yeah, when you have a lot of professional
adults. There's a real variability between the different.
Yeah, so
I think the fact that Pennsylvania
it's
just actually showed that Pennsylvania was on to substance misuse where we get the best information flows, but others it's not made up as well. So Pennsylvania is the main.
Anything else that you're doing that works well, like you, for example?
Yeah, I just think having
we had
that
the
allowed
communication
when
we
you're
didn't
in
do with our.
community, it's just so important. And it's about the right search at that time.
I'm sorry, if you lost this,
that specific person. But obviously the services need to be. I think maybe there's something around opportunities around how to services. Working especially as a lot of the services are being stripped now. So we need to be creative with that and actually start working much more collaboratively. I think there is obviously a lot of direct work, but actually that doesn't mean just by having agreements or something. I think it's located and doing those kind of things, we need to go with them opposed to them always coming to us. So I think there's something about it a bit more locality based to me. So locality based is one. And I think the other thing for me is very important to have a single of those young adults or young people that are continually reoffending. Yeah. So how do we do about that? IOM stuff and the youth IOM, I think I'm hoping to develop. So we can start to ensure that those people who are continuing to be offended, we need to have some saturation, but they need more support, and it doesn't mean one hand. We need the right support.
Those resources are there. I mean, when we do the celebration next week, we invite their families to come in once they've finished the programme. And we also have people from the community who they can relate to, who have actually maybe been in that situation and make something experience. We invite those guys back in to talk to the younger people, say, look, this is not yet, it's good to do prison. It's not, it's a start of the journey, not the end of it. So that, you know, and there's so many people in the community who can do that. Just by talking to these young people, bit of handhold, like you say, it makes such a difference to them.
I think as well, in terms of, I think as well, in terms of professional services, I struggle to get my head around why community services are not actually more visible within the prison environment and supporting individuals within the prison environment. And it kind of like touching on what I said before. Why are we, and I get the whole resource there. What's really important for me working with young adults regularly is we talk about the lack of resource within the prison and within the community. But why are we not, like we said earlier, collaborating and bringing community resources into prison to help support those mental health issues, to sort of like teach and impact people around trauma and give them that confidence so that when they're more sad again, they're a much more rounded individual and more capable of the trust.
A little pushback then, how you're a prison, you're manager, as we have you to help us to facilitate that.
Well, for me, with Time for Change, I'm quite fortunate because especially in my Time for Change, all groups have psychologists from the community that actually come in. And I actually am more than happy to arrange for them to come in, a sitting in groups, engage, build those relationships so that they're in a position to support these things. I'm so encourage them actually go through the vetting system so that they can have access to keys to be able to enter the jail and see people at a time that can be for them. That doesn't then impact on me.
Because I think that's also an issue.
So the vetting isn't an issue. If you're a professional individual and you've already got vetting, the vetting is quite it's a simple process. It does take a bit of time.
It requires a bit of a shift, like a shift though, doesn't it? Because like within the NHS, you know, or mental health services are commissioned, I use that custody and it does require without like to do something that's different. We've got the freedom to do something that's like in between, which other services don't always. I don't know what we can like feedback in terms of like
We need the pilot into there.
Not just on that thing.
Yeah, well,
Maybe get, I don't know, DWP early, you know, kind of.
The other thing with that is, it's about looking at services that, so we're not duplicating work.
Absolutely.
Right, so we're actually supporting what's happening because we always have to all there's a people on both sides. So we don't want to duplicate work. What we want to do is we want to make that work more effective. We want to support it so we can complete it.
So what I'm saying, we are doing with something that is Western Partnership thinking. So we are never had this on how to do it as well, because all of a sudden electricity has gone off. So we work with different boroughs. So for example, we've got one intervention, you don't know when culturally integrated family approach. So that's so you know, then I'll go and deal because that's what I know. It's not actually in a rugby based frame, financial inclusion products at all. So it's much bigger. Well, no, so that's the main not there. The question probably you have to isn't this how these are what I'm doing now. So like perhaps, but you know, so you know, there are people already. I was saying so.
say, we start with that, and we as a group, obviously, big example, something that I was spoken about before in the borough. So young awareness, so young, so really important to get, go to our, I think about. No, we have, no, I mean, that's not.
Yeah, I was meant to, but yeah. So could we give you book?
The other one is the IOM, so Matt and I are looking, well, Matt's looking to develop a youth IOM, and again, that starts to bring together all of those multi-agency services. And what we'd love to do is do statistical obviously by the time they come out, of course, there's going to be those services in place. That's one thing we could take away, maybe. We are just waiting for the.
I think it's great, I think that would give them that around service.
Going to.
Should we get back again?
Thank you. That's a good, it's a good model, because it makes these probation periods. Doesn't give you necessarily kind of mandated way of doing it, or some outcomes, and it just demonstrates. We're not plugged into the prison. Know exactly. That's right. That's fine. No problem. Let's think about it.
Yeah, you just mind. Okay. Let's come back into a big group. Yeah, we just come back into a big group just to feedback some of the discussions. So yeah, please.
Yeah, so one of the first ones we mentioned was about an opportunity is if we know and can plan for release, for example, of particular individuals, then actually give us an opportunity to then ensure that the service and support they receive when they're back on borough, for example, is effective. An example that was given was recently when there was the custodial sentences where the individuals were released early in the sentences, and there was a specific date where we were aware that a number of individuals would be released into the community. There's actually an opportunity to factor in support, I think, around drugs and homelessness on that day to ensure that they had a wraparound service. And that worked reasonably well. And if we could roll that out on a more kind of regular basis in terms of having that support out of the door, essentially, when individuals are on borough, that would likely be effective in terms of that reoffending piece.
A couple of things from ours, which I thought were brilliant. Staying connected as professional networks beyond the gate. I think one of the things we could do better with is working with our prison colleagues, because we've got a local dispersal prison in our literally just outside our borough, and a lot of our offenders, our community, are come through that prison. And so one of the things is around kind of the prison coming back out into the community and kind of continuing that professional network beyond the gates. Rick talks about, which I liked as well, connecting with the community resources. So sort of developing community champions, in want of a better word, and then come out into community, working with communities, working with professionals to kind of to build those connections. Community services being visible within custody, there's a thing. Wouldn't that be fantastic if we could kind of have a kind of a, I don't know, quite a transferable kind of community kind of resource that was in and out of prison. So I go in prison, but I can still access my Job Centre Plus, or I can still access DWP or housing, or where. I think we're a long way off that. I don't think there's anything when we're talking about that, maybe talking about ways in which we could potentially look to do something like that in Harringay, even if it's on a much smaller scale. We already do. We've got our IOM, we've got our Project Future going and do trauma-informed approach approaches with the team. So I'm sure we could look at developing small pieces of work that potentially benefit offenders.
And one thing we mentioned within our group was that actually across the borough we have quite a lot of good services, even just simple things around upskilling and basic life skills, which actually are key things which help people to stop offending eventually and to kind of go a positive pathway. But actually we as professionals maybe aren't as aware of everything that's out there that we can then offer to service users or for people who need it. It's about offering it at the right time and doing that kind of journey where they're actually receptive to receiving that support. So actually we as professionals, as a starting point, if we're kind of clear about what the offer is, that we can then offer out to the young people and adults who might benefit from it.
Right, thank you. Are there anyone online that's got anything they want to contribute? Nothing else. Thank you. Okay, so the last question for the group or for the individual group. That's the question.
Microphone's on.
Yeah.
Can you hear us, people online?
Maybe send a message if you can hear us.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. So really, this one's around again what we as a CSP can do to support the working space. Again, I know we covered a lot of ground, and I'm not expecting, as I said, I'm not expecting all the others to go away with a kind of ready-made answer book. But it's really, as I said, just to start generating some of this discussion. We might go away today and come back and say, okay, I think that was a really good idea, you or Councillor Robert, or sorry, Will.
I was just going to ask, in terms of what the CSP do, what is there a current governance around reoffending? For drugs, we've got Combating Drugs Partnership. Do we have a reoffending group at the moment?
Right, so it's a good question, very good question, and it's quite topical. So what we're looking to develop is I call it it's not a reducing reoffending group, it's a kind of a CS, Community Safety Action Plan group, because one of the priorities of the CSP is reducing reoffending. So what we're looking to do is to pull together a group of professionals to monitor, obviously, the data around reoffending and to report that back. So I'd like to develop a kind of a suite of kind of, I suppose, KPIs, for example, making sure everybody's had a pre-release assessment, for example, before they're released. But that kind of stuff would be great. So this would be really useful, I think, to start generating some of those ideas.
And I think as part of this session that we're going to do, I think if we could also add clear action points that we want to kind of track. So if we can do that as well separately, so we can bring it together and start that whole action tracker, so we can develop this through that group as well. So,
but I should say, well, there is a lot pan under reducing reoffending board that I sit on as well. So really, this is just about how we together, collectively, collaboratively, can work together to support some of this work. Matt talked about pooling resources, which I think is key, and not just money. I'm talking about people as well. Interventions, for example, but there could be other things that I haven't thought about that you think, well, actually, if you did that, that might help, that might be better. I know there's lots of issues, not issues. There's lots more we could do to work with colleagues from housing. How could we, support, because often they're kind of being landed with quite risky individuals who they knew nothing about, and so it's things like that as a collapse. So what are those sorts of things that bug you in your everyday day work? What can you tell us today, or maybe even after this, if you can't think of anything today that we could then have some clear action points around for the CSP. And again, we'll say about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back to group. Right. Yeah, so what action?
I think the proposal that I've been doing you guys, why don't you first for young people around that license, but they should be, they used to do it. Okay, and do they still have the idea of including the speakers?
Struggling with, start of police Harringay.
So that's, I'm definitely going to be a blast.
Yeah, actually had more of the, so because there's one borough there, but you out. Yeah, still. There's nothing. Yeah, yeah, so they made a super borough basically, yeah. So, yeah, it's about. Source-wise.
That continues. Who's that?
Different.
Think it's important.
And I'm not.
It's work for you, I mean, so, like,
Yeah, and that was, they did have a couple of eye-openers there for long. To be offended, so that is the reason why I stopped.
So I do understand.
Okay, so again, just really throwing it out there, kind of what, you know, for example, you were talking about, someone was talking about this. How can we, you know, change rights?
Very late, but it's not.
Lobbying.
That's different. A lot of times, it's based on two factors. One is around safeguarding. Child, so back to the house anyway. And then the second thing is about protection of the victim. So it's hard to, each individual is, you have to do it by case, but I do feel that there is probably potentially something about housing.
Just understanding.
And those opportunities that is available within housing anyway. We know that having housing is difficult. The housing market is very difficult anyway. But I would imagine young having what's available.
Yeah. And it used to be that you were priority needs if you were coming out with them, but they've changed that a few years ago. So, yeah, we've got a couple of young partners who.
Are they still doing the schemes around private rent? That was anything where they go to deposit or lend.
If you're you, what do you like doing?
I think that happens.
And employment as well, right? Still an issue.
Another bit for me is the big years. That every single one of the same things that it's real and otherwise they don't have the opportunity. They do get this lot of what they can earn.
What do you think the diary of where we, I think about it in kind of like we've got a diary of themes where it's like if you want to find this. Have you got that?
I think it's something about the innovation team looking at all of the big contracts that we are seeing. Yeah, so commissioning and social value element. How do we ensure that the was having before the media and then how do we ensure that the small of that profile specifically for
If you can actually maybe speak to Mike, to Ruth and Steve, work with the.
I don't think mannerism works though, but I would think knowing the reality of like how ready young people are. I don't want to label young people as not people, but you know, things like the dusting young people
Those like supported employment opportunities have been really life changing, I think.
That work experience is, it's actually work experience.
I worked in crisis, and what crisis I did was.
Yeah, like work.
To get experience in, take stuff. So like taster sessions being different.
Yeah.
I
think the gap is where the adults are.
Well, I think for the adults, I think having something like that is great, but also something tangible where they can be very friendly.
Yeah.
Very quick.
To my daughter's school, it's like, we did this, like, go inside and speak to people about the opportunity. The police from the crime, so got these.
Sorry, I was just thinking about shop. It's like, it would have so much if there was a way, I can incentivize we've got a key, brave pillbox. Yeah,
Yeah, but my challenge to that, my challenge is that when these big firms are bidding for the money, they have to, part of the application, say, part of social value, how they're giving back to the community.
Yeah.
So I think that we give this back to the commissioners on the tendering process. So we go back to the tendering process.
Local ones, right? Like, it's not to be great. That's just it's completely like, yeah, so it's also like the way that it sounds more kind of, they don't treat it the same way.
As to say, I mean, it's valuing life skills.
Right, no, but I think it's like the full profit contract. Yeah, just a big contract is not like. Yeah.
CSP, so we're gonna have a work with CSS group, just understanding the different groups of people that we're talking about. So we've got youth justice team and the inspection. So there'll be different issues around young people. Adult. And then men and women, I think, and the different prisons. Just CSP can have a role, maybe getting a bit of an understanding of the different groups. And then there's some prevention. And we've got also this strategy. Something we're missing at the earliest stage, and then you mentioned that's what so what's the kind of best practice? Is there something we could be doing around young people and around the adults as well? So taking that kind of. And then
sometimes I get really passionate, but it doesn't actually come.
I'd assume there might be.
This is all well and good, right? And I think
tracking or
you didn't need to have all of these
offenders and actually doing some relatively
We want
intensive
to remember the kind of people.
costs are probably shared with different parts of the system. So we, you know, the cost of some that we don't bear the cost of some going into housing, but we do bear the cost of
educating
housing people or.
making sure that they're ready.
So that maybe the cost incentive.
And realising that they're not going to, yes, they're going to be having the opportunity to employ, but they're not making anywhere near the amount of money that they would make in committing crime. So we have to have a very strong education element in there, and it's about preparing a readiness. So because we can have all of these resources, but if individuals aren't really to be engaging with it, then, you know, they're going to revert back to what they know best.
The other thing that I hear a lot of is, I can't work for somebody else.
Yeah.
I couldn't possibly work for somebody else. And that is about trauma, I think. It's about like not being able to put trust in
It's
other
not going to be
people.
for everyone, and we know that it's not going to be for everyone, but there may be a small cohort that are just ready.
Yeah.
And some of that are not, and we have to accept that, and that's just.
Yeah.
But there's also moments when people are going to be more ready. Where they typically would go.
I'm not saying that we're not going to find people that are ready, but I think the important thing is that.
Maybe something tangible, doing a kind of profile, to share with partners across the borough.
We try to get
the issues.
as many people ready as possible through education, so that at the end of the day, we know that we're going to have that 5% of people that are ready and are just going to jump into it because people mature at different times and different
Because the last time when I was my M3, I could have got it on HP rather than. But I think that's what you're talking about, that kind of thing about money.
I think we take for granted about interest rates, down to mortgage. I think, I don't know. That's what it is.
And at the end of the day, if you're getting up in the morning, and these guys are, they've got the skill set, it's just directed in the wrong direction. And if we're able to kind of like grab hold of that and kind of like give proper purposeful guidance.
So is that?
Like the not, I'm intrigued to find it.
It's a fundamental issue, unlike some of our other things like.
2004, 2003, and then this
Now geographically, so we don't necessarily supposed to get people because
what we've got to do is we've got to get them back.
because a lot of them necessarily government is going to huge.
And want to, but they don't have the skills that know how to be able to do it. So in order to make this successful, you've got to give them the skills, the know-how, build the confidence and empower them to believe that, okay, if I'm working in Tesco and I'm only for the week, I'm sorry, I'm not, or whatever.
Can I suggest an action then for me to speak to you about how we do?
Sorry.
I didn't know that.
Oh, we can give you a whole lot of reasons. Well, yes.
You have to translate, right? You have to translate.
Okay, should we come back?
This is. Nearly. I'll let you finish. All right.
Isn't directly related.
Yeah. More about definitely. Yes. When we look back at in this county hall, it's a big amount of things that you come up with the number of affected highways as well.
Because you guys see, at the moment, there might be cuts, obviously, but there's still close rights, there's part and that kind of stuff. The best use on the site.
We think, but for me, it's
Why don't we bring that as a deal? Why don't we just like?
That could be another.
How do we sort of join?
Why don't we bring it up?
We can have a couple of each side.
And it's an action.
Actually, we might some that need time to do, so do you think this would work?
Jointly, put them on a pathway.
Yeah, I think the challenge is the strategy, and I understand the problem. Do we have the resources? What is the role in?
We can at least put it as a consideration for the board plan.
We can work together. Set up some partnerships, but.
One thing that might
need to commission.
just in suggestions, where it was fun.
Where does that sit?
People
Home Office, London, the central government. That's maybe why.
The offenders, and what we're taking from the journal is we.
Who owns
This is the first issue. All the different, just like, it's coming to the next. I do think there's a really learning thing, because it's not just about, it's about the partnership, really, you know. We talk about family, second. I think school exclusions and all of those kind of things, and I think a lot of that, we don't understand that. So we have to understand that, so that needs to then impact on how we recommission, how we think about services to come together, and a lot of it's still up in
the being difficult.
Yeah.
When you read the report, it's out. We can say, I think, what are the books, when's
what day?
So maybe we can, because I know these are.
And then it's 8 to 10 a.m.
Okay, can we come back together as a bigger group? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so just a couple of points. I think most of the feedback we got was around employment. So I think what we'll do on this particular session is we'll start looking at some of the actions around employment and making improving employment pathways. I know Sandeep's group came up with some slightly different ones. So from myself, from our group, so things like what can we do to support offenders, especially those coming out of prison or those recently released from prison, to improve their employment, training and educational skills, getting them employment ready. Often offenders, I hate to keep using the word offenders, but I use that collectively in this instance. But offenders are often going to prison with poor educational abilities, come out of prison with poor educational abilities, unfortunately, and they're just not ready for work. We're expecting, or young people, for example, who are expecting to rock up, and start work at 9 o'clock in the morning when they haven't got out of bed till 6. Of drugs. So, those kinds of things we have to be quite mindful about. There's some stuff around how we can work a bit more collaboratively in terms of kind of supporting young people. So, for example, working with employers locally, trying to identify key employers that want to work with ex-offenders. A lot of employers go, yeah, we work with ex-offenders, but they do everything they can not to. The risk assessments and whatnot. So trying to find, and that's an action we can take forward as a CSP. I'm trying to think, for example, what they can do, inclusive economy, for example, again, what they can do locally with our local businesses. What opportunities we as a council can offer ex-offenders, because we have these massive schemes, millions of pounds. Are we actually saying, we want to take, 5% of our employment workforce on these should be from an ex-offender, for example. So there are a couple of bits from me.
Yeah, and we said as a starting point, really understanding the extent of the issues potentially that are faced by those released from prison into our communities. Really understanding that, so maybe there's a bit of a data exercise around really what that means locally, and then being able to almost create a profile of sort that can be shared with our different partners and agencies to really understand the extent of the problem, but also some of the kind of pinch points of where we might need to be doing more. And essentially also just making sure that we as a CSP, I suppose, because the question was, how can the CSP support the work? Just understanding the roles of the CSP, the roles and services across the whole CSP, and how they actually interlink together. So rather than working in silo and, for example, when somebody with offending behaviours turns up at one of our services and then has a kind of an acute need for support, actually making sure that we're linking in holistically to ensure that the whole of the CSP is then almost activated to therefore kind of deliver a wraparound service to have a positive impact overall. And also the continued link between professionals and the prison service is quite key. We spoke about in terms of housing, for example, often individuals who are released, who, for example, go into housing and do receive housing, actually, then their housing support officers aren't always aware of the specific needs or kind of their particular needs for those individuals, which can obviously lead to issues then with them, for example, holding on to their housing or to them having kind of long-term positive outcomes.
Just one I did miss, and this is for Ian and his colleagues, is to start looking at the IOM processes again, Ian, because I know pre-pandemic they were working quite well, but there's a lot of I suppose that they feel a bit more clunky now. I think kind of relationships have drifted a bit. We used to have, for example, case management meetings pre-release, that kind of stuff. So maybe as an action for me, I'll come, and we are developing a youth IOM. If someone look at backyard, but we are developing a youth IOM as well. So it'd be really useful for me to come and meet with you or one of your colleagues just to look at how we can reinvigorate, refresh, and kind of get that back kind of functioning again. As best we can. As I said, a lot of these are action. We've got a lot of actions that have come out of this, and I think Councillor Obat did say at the beginning, we are looking to kind of have a bit of a, is it a refresh? Is that the right word to use? A refresh, where we're going to look at the CSP, the processes, what works well, what doesn't work so well, and what we can do kind of. So a lot of this will kind of be fed into that. A lot of the stuff Sandy was just talking about, how the CSP works, how we can bring services together better, etc. So we will take this back and have a look at that in more detail. I will pull together some of the actions that we've and some of the comments from this meeting, which I'll feed back to Naz. And that will be sent to the wider group. If I've missed anything, or if you go away from anything, oh, I wish I'd said that, or I wish I'd thought about that or done that. And certainly our colleagues from the Home Office as well, if there's anything you think, you might be able to send our way in terms of potential support that we could utilise, that would be really, really useful for us. This isn't the last of this conversation. We will be coming back to this, but as you said, we're looking to kind of refresh the current CSP process. So probably in the new year, which is, I know it's only the beginning of this year, but probably towards the end of this year in the new year, we'll start looking at coming back to some of these themes, revisiting and seeing where we've got to, what's worked, what's not worked, etc., etc. But yeah, thank you very much for your input today. It's been so appreciated.
So,
yeah, please, any more questions? Sorry, I should have said that.
I'm a novice to this. It's my first time here. Do they involve experienced individuals into this process?
It's a good question. Well, that's something we could look at as part of the refresh. So we'll certainly look at things like
because
that.
I think if
We have that. We have
it in the
past, for example, and talk to us about their lived experience. To have a discussion about that. I think, yes.
but in terms of solutions to some stuff.
You can come back to it. Yeah, we should mind that have that people come here.
Project Future, didn't we? Project Future coming.
But part of the plan we want to do going forward is just that, what we want to reinvigorate the partnership. I think voice of that, voice of young people coming through strongly, survivors, voice of perpetrators, so yeah, there's a workshop on gambling harm. Ex-gambling people came back and we talked about their lived experience, about how much people don't know about their harm. And, it really brings things to life. How things that's part of the refresh that we also go.
But in terms of the refresh, we're going to get all of the members involved to see how we should, as an away day, to see how we should be working together and how future meetings should look like. So. Well, thank you, everyone. I don't think we've got any urgent items. So the next CSP meeting will be around July. So I thank you. And minutes will be circulated with actions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is, yes.
CSP,